Hello, my name is Justin Bright. Welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And I know that I said that we were going to get right back to crewed Gemini before once we came back, but that was before we had two sets of engine failures right in a row on the Gemini spacecraft that we were trying to launch. So we just had some ignition failures on the pad. On the spacecraft that we were trying to launch, and so we're rolling it back and trying to roll out the Gemini 6. So I basically had rolled the 5L out, or rolled the 6 out, had a failure, rolled it back, rolled the 5L out, had a failure, rolled that one back, and now we're doing another swap. So just lovely times with ignition failures that remind us that we are in fact still using test light. So now we are here with the Martian Moonhopper spacecraft, which I have been very excited to get back to. We have adjusted our trajectory such that we have a nice low para-Arian right now, and I'm going to use that for maximum Hohmann effect. It cost us just a couple deltaV, couple tens of deltaV to reduce our para-Arian from up here to where it is now. And that has ended up saving us about a couple hundred deltaV in reducing our apa-Arian down to roughly where we are going to meet up eventually with Deimos. So yeah, we are a little bit out of plane, but you know, matching this inclination from all the way out here is pretty darn good, I think, having gotten it up to this point. So I'm pretty happy about where we're at and the amount of deltaV that we are going to be expending and getting there. So we will see how that works. I think what I'm going to end up having to do is just just orbit naturally until I just happen to cross Deimos's path, because I'm not in any hurry. Now that I'm out here in the Martian system, I can just spend as much time as I need to waiting for the right encounter. So I think we're just going to do that and just see when that'll be, because I don't want to rush this. I want to spend as much time as I can as an alternative of spending a lot of deltaV. But yeah, here we are. We've got panels facing the sun because we've got 16 hours until our insertion burn into the Martian system, and we can see it coming up. And yeah, we've done this once or twice before, where we've had a flyby, an orbit, and just a landing that just went great. It just went fantastic, as I recall. But we are coming on back, and I never get sick of seeing the other planets in RP-1. We are 10 hours away, and yeah, like I mentioned a little bit before, there's not a whole lot of analog for what we are trying to do with this mission, which is just fine by me. Like, I like this pioneering aspect, but I'm just super stoked to see if this actually succeeds. One bit of house cleaning just before we get here. Our geostationary ComSat network is actually working fantastic. So that actually is working now, and the contract has completed, which is just lovely. That got us 500,000 funds, and that will help us to buy all kinds of stuff, because I have a lot of Apollo architecture that I'd like to start unlocking here pretty darn soon. All right, so there is Mars as we approach. We are getting down low into its gravity well, so we can use that to as much advantage as we can as we wait to insert into this orbit. So 10 minutes away, and we flipped around. I'm going into free camera, and we are going to now open up and double check what our maneuver looks like. Node 2 can go away. I was trying to get things moving forward, but I think what we need to do is just match this altitude as much as we possibly can. Yeah, because we want to have a perfect chance of encounter, and the sphere of influence on Deimos is probably going to be real tiny. So we're going to want to be as, as precise about that as we can be. All right, nimble little spacecraft whipping around. Yeah, because this has two sets of RCS jets so that it can better rendezvous with the spacecraft, which we are going to see just how overpowered this is for what I'm trying to do. I was told that I could basically have just done this on RCS jets, and I think that's absolutely accurate. However, you know, whatever. I have it now, and I really don't know what it looks like down there, and that's a big part of this, is me actually going through and experiencing each of these planets, each of these bodies as we explore. Like, that's part of the exploration for me, is finding out what works, what doesn't work, and how we're going to be able to engage with them further. Unfortunately, that means that it's usually the second or third mission out to a particular body that I succeed, and the first couple times I fail. But I think it's a little bit more realistic that way. Like, if you look at the space history, the history of flights out, especially in interplanetary trajectories, there's a lot of failures before you start seeing successes. Like, as usual, that starts to narrow down a little bit as you get closer to now. Like, missions succeed a little bit more frequently than they fail these days. But when we were just hammering this stuff out back in the age of the space race, there was just a bunch of failures before there were any actual successes. So that's just kind of something that we have to be prepared to deal with as I'm launching things with old technology. I like to get ahead of myself just a little bit. Like, I've been talking a bit on the videos about a reusable Martian or moon lander, and that's like so far from actually being something that I can do. Like, I keep forgetting that engine ignitions are a thing, and you can't use generics for absolutely everything. So yeah, that's probably not something that we're going to be able to do, but we can still use a nice reusable space station to meet up with and do lunar orbit rendezvous type missions. But we'll talk more about that when I start thinking about it. For now, we are just about inserted into this orbit. We have captured, but now it's just a matter of just getting down into the orbit that I am looking for. Signal. All right, but we don't have signal, so I'm not going to be doing much of anything for a little while. But yeah, so for now, it's a matter of waiting until we get to a good controls locked. So let's go ahead and orbit up a bit. There we go. Should have connection. Point ourselves towards the sun once again, and we have 2,400 meters per second of deltaV here in the Martian system, and we are going to be using that. Oh, do I not actually have sun? No, I don't. Over there. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we have 2,400 meters per second of deltaV here in the Martian system that I'm going to be using to try very hard to visit both bodies. But this should be enough for us to at least reach Deimos at some point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a maneuver down here, and I'm going to just reduce my para-Aryan by like a little bit, just to try to get it down to exactly Deimos's altitude. And then I'm going to plus orbit a bunch of times until we just happen to get an encounter. Because you can see it goes by pretty darn close a bunch of times. Oh, wow. Okay, so in about a week's time, we have an encounter that is really close, but not quite getting there. So you can see how small the sphere of influence is, that like just this tiny little bit of separation is enough for us not to actually make the encounter. So let's see what we can do to dial this in a little bit closer. Okay, so I was actually mistaken. I forgot there was one more step that we need to do before we do this, and that is get our relative inclination down to 0 degrees, because we're not going to get any kind of accidental encounters with me being this far away from the darn plane that it is orbiting in. So I'm going to say, what does this say? Align planes. Woof, that's expensive. Okay, the rendezvous planner wants me to do it, make this burn up here, but it's a lot less expensive to do that down here. So that is what we are going to plan to do to change our inclination, and that's going to be something that's going to be useful, I think, forever. So yeah, we will just go ahead and do that. All right, just about to fire up the burn to get into the proper inclination with Deimos. Just a couple seconds till we fire that up, and there we go. Yep, so that brings our relative inclination on down. 1 degree. half a degree, and here we go. We are just about done. Boom. Nice. Perfect. That's awesome. That way we will actually be able to encounter Deimos, because we definitely would not have met it before with how small the sphere of influence is. So now we are basically touching its orbit right there. So let's see what our encounters look like now. Go away. I'm just gonna do this. Boop, boop, boop. Pretty close. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Look at that. See? That's awesome. I love it when a plan comes together. So yeah, in 6 days and 3 hours and 38 minutes, we are going to encounter Deimos. Fabulous. So let's focus target and see what this burn to capture into this orbit looks like, because I think it's going to be just terrible. Wow, look at that. Look at how perfect this is. 3 kilometer Parademos? Parademos. And this is going to cut. Whoops, there it goes. It zipped down by. Look at that. It's so. We can completely reverse our orbit like really easily. Okay, there we go. Easy now. Look at that. How cool. Yeah, this is why they said that, because look at this. This is 649 meters per second to capture into a nice, beautiful circular orbit, just skimming the surface of Deimos. And then if I just go 1, 2, 3, 4, we have now completely canceled our orbital velocity. I feel like a doofus, but you know, well, I could have known if I would have done any math whatsoever. So I'm not going to say how could I have known. I could have known, but it's fine. I'm really not worried about it. This is still super duper cool. But yeah, this looks like we are in good shape. I'm feeling very positive about being able to do this and then getting back out and doing the hop down to, what do you call it? The hop down to Phobos. But we are going to have to see how that one goes. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, and we do have another launch in between now and then. So what I'm going to do now is I am just going to... All right, so I've just put down a marker to gauge the time for when we are going to get there. So that's going to have us partway up on our orbit towards Deimos, where we will then capture into that orbit and send down our lander to do all the good science. And in the meantime, let's go ahead and see what science we can do otherwise. Because, yeah, it looks like we are already operating on most of this. And yes, right. Yep, so that all looks lovely. Looks like we are already doing all the good science. Everything is fantastic, and I am super excited. So let's point ourselves down at the sun. Up at the sun, you know, whatever. There we go. Now we have plenty of power. Actually, this is going to kill us. Oh, but not if I have the... Right. Avionics is a thing. So if my avionics is off, then we have plenty of power. Okay, so that's not a problem. So yeah, now we will settle into this orbit, do some science in orbit of Mars, and wait for our chance to orbit Deimos and land. But now it's time for some more Gemini stuff, hopefully, this time. All right, I think it is time, finally, to begin work on Apollo. Yes, indeed. We are going to do some unlocks because I have the money and I think it's time. So let's just kind of scan through and see what we're looking at. We have the Rove Mate, so I can actually finally get planning on a redo of the Solarback mission. Give that one more try. That would be a lot of fun. So that is going to be coming up very, very soon. What else? We have some prototype nuclear propulsion engines, but they're kind of awful. Like, they're so incredibly heavy for not a whole lot more benefit than we would otherwise be getting. Like, look at this thing. This thing is 15 tons, and it has a specific impulse of only 900. So I'm just not sure that that's actually worth the incredible weight that is. So I'll play with that and I'll look at the numbers and see if that's not ridiculous, but that feels pretty ridiculous to me for in comparison to something like something like an RL-10 that weighs 0.14 tons and has a specific impulse of 422. So yeah, I'm just not sure that the incredible specific impulse is going to make up for it unless it is just a truly monster of a craft. I think that the later propulsion and nuclear propulsion is a little bit better. Like we're seeing the mass start coming down on these, but yeah, I'm not really sure how viable these actually are. Oh, here's a nice small one finally. Almost 1,000 second specific impulse for a little one at, oh, look at that, 111 kilonewtons of thrust, 945 specific impulse, 12 ignitions, and only weighs 2.2 tons. Okay, so that sounds pretty interesting. That sounds like something that I could make a probe out of. They do use liquid hydrogen, which means you are subject to the cooling issues and MLI layers and all of that garbage that I've been dealing with on with my Hydrolox engines. But yeah, that sounds like something interesting, and I'll play with those numbers and see if I can't come up with something something fun. But I feel like there's like a very specific use case that exists for a 12-ton or a 15-ton upper stage or like orbital maneuvering system, and I'm not sure what it is, but I'd have to do some research to figure that out. So yeah, I'll play around with that and we'll see what that ends up looking like. But now we've got a lot of Apollo parts and I want to get started. We also have some Gemini B parts, which is pretty fun. I actually could probably have done I've done a lot of like my research is moving very quickly, and I have done some custom building of a Gemini space station prototype, but it doesn't use the Gemini B parts. It's kind of custom built. So even though the Gemini B parts are specifically designed to go with the manned orbiting laboratory, which was exactly what my spacecraft is basically trying to do. So anyways, all that to say is that's something that I would like to unlock and try out, but it's not going to be on the mission specifically for which it was designed. But we'll see how that turns out. But anyways, I would like to eventually transition to Apollo because I think it's just going to be better in a lot of ways to do what we need to do as far as long-term, long-duration missions. And if we are looking into the future of doing stuff around Mars, we could absolutely get to the moon with Gemini, but if we want to get to Mars, we're going to want Apollo and like the Block 3 speculative upgrades to the Apollo spacecraft that is going to give us that long-term, long-duration space flight experience for our astronauts and make that safe and possible. So all that to say, let's unlock the Apollo command module, pardon me. Come on, let me click it. And that is 800,000 funds. Badoom, huzzah, there we go. We have that, and that makes our life a little bit better and a little bit cheaper. So that gets us the drogue chute for free and the forward heat shield, and now there's just a lot of little bits and bobs that we are going to be putting on here. Apollo launch escape system. We got the main parachute pack. We are probably going to want the service module and the service module decoupler. I am going to want the Gemini B stuff because I will retool our manned orbiting laboratory business to deal with that and the retro module. And yeah, why not? I'm not sure what I would use an external command seat for, but it's always a fun thing to have. And I find that the generic pods are not all that exciting, so we're not going to use those for now. So there we go. We have spent a bunch of money, and I've finally unlocked the majority of Apollo. I kind of want this little lander can because I think this is the what I would have to do for Gemini. So let's unlock that just in case. Don't need the Mark II pod cover. We do want the docking ports for Apollo. That's going to be very, very important. What else am I missing? Apollo service or... Oh, look at that. The Agena target vehicle nose cone. There is one. Oh, man. That would have been fun to use back when I've been doing a lot of Agena stuff, but yeah, so it goes. That's entirely on me just not realizing it existed. Yeah, so there we go. We've got some research coming in. I think it's about time that we're going to need to go and do some more actual rocketry upgrades because we're going to want to boost our boosters. get the solids and orbital rocketry, and then let's do another round of let's get that F1. Let's get that F1 rolling. Large hydrolox upgrades. There's a big upgrade to the J2 and the RL10. Very exciting stuff. And ooh, the Star 17. That's a venerable upper stage solid rocket. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking at now. I'm trying not to actually go like way too far out in the future as far as selecting my researches, because I could like pick up all the way up to the point where our science caps out, which is around here. But I find that my priorities shift too much to really plan that far ahead, especially at this point in the game. So I'm just going to leave this stuff selected, and we'll see if my priorities shift all that much, because as fun as it is to select everything out, I end up having to like cancel all the way down to nothing and then reselecting, and I'm doing that over and over and over again. So I might as well just skip the middleman and leave it like this. All right, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Take 3. Seems to be successful. Fantastic. So we are lifting off with Thomas Reed and Stanley Wood, our new pilot and scientists that are heading up into a low Earth orbit on Gemini 6, which is launching slightly out of order, as I said, because of all of the launch failures that we've had. But yeah, so we are on our way up, and this is a very standard sort of mission. We are just going up to do that, to do orbital flight with maneuvers and 2+ crew that I had mentioned previously. So we are launching now, and this actually works out pretty darn well, because this puts us out before the Gemini 5 lunar mission, which is going to be using this same Gemini service module setup. So that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to launch this mission, was so that I could have a kind of test of this engine, of this service module, before I sent it out to the moon. Not that there's any like actual chance of failure in that. Like there's no like life support failures as far as I know. Gosh, I hope not. In Kerbalism for RP-1. So there shouldn't be any drama, shouldn't, on this launch as once we actually get into orbit. But I want to see kind of how it works, and I want to look at how the numbers shake out a little bit after using this for a week's time in low Earth orbit, because this is going to be up for 8 days, and that's about how long it's going to take to roll out and prep the next launch. But yeah, so far we are doing pretty well. This is a modified Paladin 1, kind of updated to modernity, so it's like a Paladin 1B or something. I probably should have named it. I'm really bad about actually maintaining my my launcher lines as far as those updates go. I've been making some changes kind of on the fly, like, I just need to fix this one little thing. I don't need to make a whole new version number, and then I end up like, well, let's update the avionics. Oh, let's just get this engine up to the latest config, and then all of a sudden it's a whole different rocket, and I haven't renamed it, and, you know, whatever. It's not great, but is what it is. I'll try to be better about that in the future. Especially with this, my Paladin line has been very squishy. Like, it's been very squishy about what is what version, because it's a very, how to put it, because it's not tethered to a real rocket configuration. Like, it's all vaguely based on the Saturn rocket, as I've mentioned repeatedly. But it's not actually. We have separation and a good ignition of our second stage, which is a single LR-87 LH2. Fabulous. It's not tethered to a very specific configuration of the rocket. Like, I've had a lot of rockets in the past that have been very closely tied to a particular real-life rocket and a real-life version of a rocket. And that's matched and I've matched that basically on the engine configuration from this to the real life rocket. But now I have so many options, and there's so many different things that I can do to pick between rockets and engines and configurations, and which upper stage I'm using and which lower stage, and how many engines and this and that I am completely untethered from reality, which I'm sure you all probably could have figured out. But it's making it so that I'm not like matching one-to-one, but like, oh, now I've upgraded to the Atlas D from the Atlas A or whatever. Whoa, I did not like how that fairing came off. That bounced a little bit. That's not great. But we are on our way up anyways. So yeah, it's not tied super well to real rockets, and so it becomes a little squishy. It becomes a little bit more like standard KSP to me, where I am just like doing whatever I feel like doing because it works, and whatever, it doesn't really, the rest of it doesn't really matter. Version numbers and matching with history isn't really important because I'm not like waiting for the next version of the Atlas to be able to get geostationary, right? Like, because that was my concern before, was like, am I going to be able to get geostationary at all based on this rocket? I just don't have rockets that are configured to do it, but I know that some version of the Atlas is going to be able to do that. It was able to do that in real life, and so I should theoretically be able to do that with my rocket here, and that was a big part of the early part of this series and the way that I engaged with rocket design. But it's no longer that. It's a lot more... That's why my frame rate has been so low. I just saw trajectories error go by, and that means that trajectories was on, which it definitely should not be anymore. So anyways, yeah, it's just, there's been a lot of changes in the way that I engage with rocket design, and I don't think it's better or worse the way that I'm doing it now, but it does require me to be a little bit more deliberate, I suppose, with naming and versioning my rockets so that it's easier for you all to follow along and to see what rockets we might be getting close to, because as I've mentioned before, this is pretty kind of sort of similar to a Saturn 1B, sort of kind of in a way, but that's the reason why I haven't been tracking that so closely, is because it's been very difficult to keep track of. So yeah, now we are here, we are in orbit. Okay, yep, that's fine. And I don't think that we are going to need this extra booster. It looks like we have packed on a little bit more deltaV than we need. I don't think there's going to be any reason to hold on to this to get to this orbit. Like, once upon a time, we needed an Agena target vehicle to accomplish the second orbit. That is definitely not true with my new service module. So let's go ahead, and we are going to stage this off and not have enough. What? I fixed this. No, I totally fixed this. Oh, I fixed it on the other one. Okay, so I may have just stranded these astronauts because I had an issue previously where I had forgotten that avionics are still needed on a spacecraft that is crewed. You still need the full amount of avionic, but I didn't have that packed before. Setting that off to deorbit. So yeah, you'll notice that I just don't have the avionics on here. I have just what is in the Gemini command pod and nothing else, which is not great. Is this the docking mechanism? I wonder if I could send up... Well, it's going to be weeks and weeks before that's done. Yeah, that's the thing about RP-1, is it would be a very long time before I got a was able to send up another spacecraft up here to rescue. Yeah, I have no control whatsoever. It's kind of like a science mode of control is basically all I have. Or a science core's worth of control is all I have. So I could basically turn on the engine and I can turn it off, but I can do literally nothing else because I am a doofus, and I fixed the problem on the other spacecraft but not on this one, which is what I was trying to get at, is I need to be a little bit more careful and deliberate about updates to my spacecraft. All right, so I might even be able to do this, maybe? I wonder. Because this has infinite ignitions, and it might fail, but there's no reason, unless there's a catastrophic failure, I think we'll be okay. So I could just leave them up there for 4 days and just see if we can't get up into the next orbit. just by like turning on the engine as we're passing by a particular orientation. God, that sounds like a bad idea. But this was already a very silly thing that I've done. So yeah, I'm gonna try that, I guess. But yeah, we're gonna say that there was a massive avionics failure. There was a bad programming bit that was sent up on this spacecraft, and it has crippled this spacecraft, and so it only has very small amounts of control. But it is otherwise working well. We do need to go in and toggle our fuel cells. Oh no. Dumping water. Don't dump the water? Maybe? Don't dump the water. Don't dump the water. Okay, so now we have perpetual electric charge. So the fuel cells are actually running and providing electricity, which is good. The fuel cell is, so we are getting plenty out of the fuel cell, but this is just telling us how long we would have if our fuel cell was not producing. Oxygen is perpetual because we have a LOX to GOX converter going on there. And we have some nitrogen, it looks like, for repressurizing the capsule. Yep, we do have a nitrogen pressure control system that is rolling, and keeping us looking pretty good. We cannot do anything about pointing our spacecraft to try to preserve the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, but that is in a tank deep inside these fairings. So hopefully that will not... there's not going to be a whole lot of heat penetration onto that, and so there will hopefully not be too much boil off there. So yeah, I think we're okay, question mark. I'm really concerned about the lack of control capacity because I screwed up. So I'm going to have to double check our new spacecraft to make sure that that actually works. Yeah, note to self, when you are working on building a service module, make sure it has avionics, you doofus. But meanwhile, let's just work on these science experiments. Like, why the heck not? Like, while we're up here, it's going to be just as hard to get home in 4 days as it would be if I were to do it right this second. So there's no reason not to just leave this rotating gently through space. Point this in a way that's maybe a little bit less pointed directly at the having the tank pointed directly at the sun. Point this up. There we go. So that's where we are going to leave them, and we are going to come back and see them again in... I think we have science happening so that we need 5 days and 11 hours, but we can do that in the upper part of the orbit as well. So I'm going to do this 3 days and 23 hours and 48 minutes. 3 days. 40. There we go. So that is when we will visit this and try to rescue this spacecraft. And there we go. Good luck, Thomas and Stanley. All right, so 4 days later, we're back, but we've decided that the contract has decided to just start over for some reason, which is just awesome. So yeah, this is probably not going to work out. Let's see, I still have enough food and water and stuff, so I can give this one more shot, but I'm a little more worried about it than I was because this is taking a little bit longer. So I guess we'll see. We should be okay, although the darn batteries are still giving me trouble. Like, every time I look at the darn thing, it just decides that it's not going to work properly. All right, so we've got the power going again. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a couple more days and see if that still works. I'll be right back, but I guess we're gonna have to go back to the Martian Moonhopper for that one before we get to that point. Yeah, hopefully the contract actually sticks with us, for goodness sake, this time. All right, unfortunately, I think I am all out of time on this one. Love to wrap this up, but I think I need to leave this on a bit of a cliffhanger. So if you enjoyed this episode, please let me know down in the comments below. Please like and subscribe and all that. That helps me out a lot, and I will see you next time.